Yeah.
So could I have the number, the cell phone number up on the screen that we're going to use? Okay. So I was at the South by Southwest conference earlier this year, and people were experimenting with new ways of having discussions like this. And one of the ways that they're having discussions is something called a back channel, where you send thoughts or questions or concerns up to the speaker during the presentation, and there is a kind of a dynamic response. An even better version, which we didn't have time to prepare for today, allows you all to see everyone else's comments. So it becomes a sort of an online discussion and a vocal conversation at the same time. What we're going to do today is I'm going to ask you, if you have questions, to SMS them to this number. You're going to have to write this down because you don't have it in your packet. And then Teresa over here is going to collect those, and then we're going to rapidly move through the questions and see if that works. Okay, so if I could have the next, oh no, they're still writing it, so I'll hold on there for a second. A little background, I'm a practitioner, I'm an academic. I run a business called Cambridge Innovation Center that I'll tell you about in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I don't know nearly as much as Annalise does about innovation in general, but I do think there are some ideas here that may be helpful for Spain. California, 40 or 50 years ago, was a beach resort. There was nothing there. It was good weather, but it was great beaches, but there wasn't any real business other than the movie business. And in that regard, it's not that different from, say, a Costa Blanca in Spain. You know, a nice place to go, but you'd never think of it as a center of innovation. And it is transformed into the world's headquarters of innovation in a very interesting way. So that transformation is possible, and we're going to talk about some ideas about how to get from here to there. Hopefully, throughout the course of the next couple of days, a lot of great ideas will come out, and we can mix them and match them. So could I go to the next slide, please? Oh, I think there's a clicker somewhere that, it's much better. Okay, so just briefly, I run Cambridge Innovation Center, and I'm a venture partner with New Atlantic Ventures, which is a $120 million venture fund. Cambridge Innovation Center, by background, is, I think, the largest number of startups under one roof in the United States. It's about close to 300 startups under one roof. About $1.1 billion has been invested in those companies by venture capitalists collectively. Previously, I spent time at MIT Consulting Group, where I worked with Juanjo over here, and Carlos over there, and Mitsubishi Research Institute in Tokyo. I've spent time in Madrid, Singapore, a number of other places around the world. So what's special about Cambridge, Massachusetts is, by the way, can you hear me okay on this? Is this working? Okay. It's a very, very dense concentration of bright scientific talent, and I'm going to give you some data on that in a minute. And then it's also perhaps the densest entrepreneurship cluster in the world. And that may be a surprise because everyone says, isn't that Silicon Valley? And I'll show you some data on that. And what's interesting about this second point is it wasn't always true. And it's something new which is happening. And it's, again, a source of inspiration for what can happen elsewhere. Just in terms of the sort of inventive power, the collection of bright scientific minds, Boston Consulting Group pulled some data together for us this year. This is data that's never been presented in a forum like this. Just looking at a couple of metrics. One is members of the National Academies of Sciences. It should say academies. It's Academy of Medicine, Engineering, and all the academies. And that's a metric of how, if you will, how strong those institutions are considered to be by their peers in terms of leadership and scientific thought. You get invited to be a member of a national academy if you are a leader in scientific thought. The other question is simply the research budget, the dollars that these universities spend. And there are really two groups that stand out from the rest of the world. There's the California cluster of Berkeley and Stanford, and there's the Cambridge cluster of MIT and Harvard. They also are differentiated, and this is my point, in that Cambridge really is standing out as a very powerful center of scientific thought. Now, in terms of entrepreneurship, BCG, they made these little houses. I'm not sure I really like the houses, but a house is 8 companies per square mile in the fields of IT and biotech. They just picked those two sectors representatively. You could throw energy in here, and it would probably be even more true what I'm about to say. Berkeley, California, according to their data, this is Capital IQ, has 2 per square mile, 2 of these companies per square mile. Austin, Texas, which is a really cool up-and-coming area, has 8. Palo Alto is doing great at 36. And the areas of Cambridge, Kendall Square and its environments, it's a little bit cut off here for some of you, is at 163. Now what this is talking about is the sort of the peak density. This is not the total. The California cluster as a whole is roughly 2 to 3 times larger than the Massachusetts cluster as a whole. And the total size matters too. I'm not saying that it's the peak density that is the only thing that matters. But I am saying, back to Annalise's point about the social networks. Where is Annalise? Somewhere over here. The social networks that are so important in encouraging innovation work best when people have a lot of communication with each other. There's an MIT researcher named Tom Allen that looked at the frequency of communication as a times? Yeah. Maybe I need to point it in a particular direction or something. Maybe I'll stand up here. Do these work? Okay, those work great. And what he found was that every time you increase distance between 2 people, if you double the distance, you roughly cut the volume of communication down by a factor of 10. No, this is okay. Does this work still? No? All right, I'll just use this. It works. So distance matters quite a bit. And so if you can bring entrepreneurs together, this is the big idea I want to share. If you can bring entrepreneurs and innovators physically close to each other, and I mean think about how many feet they are away from each other, not how many miles they are away from each other, then you can, in a place which is a peripheral area, like a Dublin, for instance, you can create a nexus of energy which may be a stronger nexus of energy than many other places in the world, where people will collaborate better. The specific example I want to give is when maybe one entrepreneur who's in Dublin today spent time in Silicon Valley and built relationships with venture capitalists and with other entrepreneurs there, and then moves back to Dublin. If that entrepreneur is very, very tightly connected with other entrepreneurs in Dublin, they can extend their California network into the rest of Dublin. I think I'm building very much on what you were observing, Annalise. And so the question is, practically speaking, how do you make that happen? How do you really engineer your region so that those few people that have great talent and great connections are benefiting the rest of the people? So my focus is on innovation centers, which is a mechanism to make this happen. I term an innovation center as a concentration of entrepreneurs. It is not a traditional incubator. Traditional incubators generally are in economically depressed areas. They have this notion of assisting startups with business plans. They're heavily subsidized, and they take equity from the companies that are in them. That's sort of the standard incubator. We've come up with some new ideas. We believe that the traditional incubator has failed all over the world, phenomenally failed as a model. And part of it is that by taking equity and some of the other things they do, by positioning themselves as groups that help weak entrepreneurs, they are excluding the strong entrepreneurs. The strong entrepreneurs will not go to an incubator that they have to give their equity to, and they will not go to one which is positioned as a helping organization, because they do not want to signal to investors that they need that help. So in contrast, and traditional incubators, by the way, are not terrible. I mean, it's good to have them, but they're not creating Nokias and Microsofts. They're not moving the needle on the economies in which they exist. And I challenge anyone to prove otherwise. I've worked in incubators all over the world, and I just don't see it working. So Innovation Center is a new idea. This is the one idea I want to share with you today. It is not an incubator. It does not write business plans. It does not find capital for people. It is not positioned as a helping organization. It does one thing, and it does one thing very well. It concentrates entrepreneurs. It pushes them together in one physical place so they can build those networks that Annalise is talking about. Our approach to this is geared to attract the strongest innovators. So there's a guy named Rich Miner. He was one of the 2 founders of Android, a small company that made an operating system, an open source operating system for mobile phones. Android, in first quarter, shipped more mobile phones than Apple did. And it completely is overturning this entire industry. So Rich started Android for Cambridge in Cambridge Innovation Center. There's another part of Android in Silicon Valley. He would never have gone to a traditional incubator. Rich is a serial entrepreneur. He's wealthy. He's made lots of things successful, and he would never have done that. So there's no incubator managed assistance program. He doesn't want it. The startup assistance flows from the community itself. So the kinds of things Rich needs are a lead on hiring a really fantastic Java programmer. That's what he needs. So if the network works properly, he's going to find that person through the network. So the other entrepreneurs in the center are the incubation, if you will. There's no subsidy at all. We have no backing from the government or university. We're profitable and we're growing very quickly. So from a public policy perspective, this is great. You don't have to pay for this. It's very effective. Final kind of messages in terms of a big idea for you to share. Concentrate your entrepreneurs. This is where you get a vibe of entrepreneurship. This is where every night there are 3 or 4 events going on where people are meeting and mixing and mingling, building those networks that Annalise talks about. You have this kind of startup culture build when you put them together. Stop putting them everywhere throughout your country. Stop diluting your entrepreneurship by having a little bit in Dublin, for instance. They have 5 incubators in Dublin. And so they're taking all their entrepreneurs and they're spreading them out into 5 different places. When they had me over there recently, I said, don't do that. Put them all in one place in Dublin. And then lastly, focus on individuals. And this is my final point. You want to realize that the apples of the world are not built by hundreds or thousands of people graduating from your universities with good entrepreneurial training. They're built by a very small number of really exceptional individuals. So you want to design your center, you want to your concentrator to attract the Steve Jobses, the Bill Gateses of your community. And so the way you do that, just very briefly, is you put it in a very, very attractive place. You make it really beautiful. You make it, the infrastructure, the architecture has to be fantastic. You don't cut corners on this stuff, and you can get those guys to come in. And those guys will create your future.